Hi, my name is Sam Johnson and I am a voice teacher. Today I will be reacting to and analyzing Falling in Reverse performing The Drug in Me Is You, Reimagined.
I heard a knock upon my door the other day. I opened it to find her staring in my face. The feel of mortal stalking still reverberates. Everywhere I go, I drag this coffin, just in case.
So far he has spent the entire time right on his bridge, which makes it sound super intense. So a bridge in singing, or a passaggio, some people call it a break because if it's not like well managed, it does sound like a crack usually when that happens. That's a area in the voice where things just kind of change a little bit, where the sensation kind of changes. I buy into more the acoustic theory of registration being the more important thing, where suddenly just the acoustics of your vocal tract need to make a slight adjustment about which overtone that's being produced from your vocal folds is being boosted. And so he's singing in this area that there is that little changeover that happens for most lower voice people. And because he's singing in that area, it generally just sounds a little bit more shiny if you get it right. It sounds a little bit more intense. And so it does sound fairly intense when he's singing in this area. And he's going high enough that it makes me think, okay, this is pretty sustainable. It's up to the A sharp, but it's also not like straight up, or not the A sharp, the A flat, but it's not yelling it. It has a little bit of dynamic control while he's going up to it. So it sounds like from just the first 20 seconds, we're probably going to have a successful rest of the song, which I think is all I really look for from vocal technique, is to not be nervous as the viewer, because if you're nervous as the viewer, you're going to be like, are they going to be able to get to that note? I don't know, but so far he's set it up in a way that makes us feel safe kind of going forward.
My body's trembling, sent shivers down my spine. Adrenaline kicks and shifts into overdrive.
His vowel is really nice. When he went up to that G, it had a very open sound to it. It didn't sound tight. Like some of what he's doing makes it sound tight on purpose because it's part of the style. And if you don't have that sound, like you're almost trying hard, it doesn't really ring as true to the style. It doesn't feel as authentic. But when he opens to like that style, it opens up quite a bit. It's a nice change in timbre between the two.
Set your lives keep you alive.
A flip.
Snake eyes every single time you roll through the dice. I felt the darkness as it tried to pull me down. The kind taught me heart's 100-year-old house. I wrestle with my thoughts, I shook the hill down. Running from my past or praying me.
He's got a great belty sound. When the lights came up and we're able to see him, it doesn't look like he's forcing it out too much. That said, there do seem to be like physical tics that are kind of associated with some of these bigger, punchier notes, where he'll like pull it away or just kind of jerk toward it. It looks like he might be putting a little bit of extra effort on those specific notes. So just when warming up, I would make sure that you're not doing that, and that it is just something you're doing because it looks cool. Because there's nothing wrong with looking cool and recognizing that that's what people like. But I do think a lot of times people will say they're doing it as a choice, but it's actually happening because that's the only way they feel really comfortable going up to the note. And I just think that that's always kind of this big shadow over a performance where like you're in your head a little bit thinking this note is hard in some way, and so therefore I must push in some way. It's just the logic. If you're pushing, if you're trying too hard at an area, that implies that there is work to do, that you need to force into it, and it's just not really true. And so much of what he's doing doesn't have that it makes me think that he's capable of doing it the other way, that he's capable of doing it without giving those little bursts on just some notes. But just prove to yourself you can do it when you're warming up, and then when you go to perform it, like, this is 100% a choice, and then it just gives you a little bit more peace of mind knowing that you're able to go between a few different ways, which he is doing in a way where he went to those flipped parts on the G, and that was a slightly different configuration. It was a slightly different posture, but he was balanced on both that one and the kind of shoutier one. Like, he's a very great shouter. I don't think that that's a slur to say. Like, I really dig the choices that he's making so far.
I lost my goddamn mind. It happens all the time.
Yeah, his jaw movement is great.
Can't believe I'm actually.
When he went to the I can't believe that kind of sound kind of thinned out when he went to it, but he used that thinner vowel, I think, to find that quieter sound, because when he's doing the loud stuff up at that G and higher, I guess that was the G sharp, it's a very open vowel. His mouth looks like this. But when he went to I can't believe, it kind of went like this. Yeah. So dropping the jaw makes it sound a little bit more full, and it's generally going to be required as you start singing louder. But every vowel and every volume and every note, like, you have to adjust based on the tone that you want. So when he went to that one, it sounded like it just went a little bit more forward. It got a little bit brighter, and he knows how to have that balanced. It sounded like a complete choice, where sometimes when people don't get that jaw drop, you end up hearing just a ton of extra compression and it sounds strained. With him, I didn't get that when we got that vowel change. So that shows me, yes, it is a balanced decision rather than just, trying to force it out.
Meant to be here, trying to consume, and trying me is you.
I didn't think he needed to open up like that but there's nothing completely wrong with it.
Can't you see?
Yeah, I mean, he does tend to go to the and da 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 kind of place. And da, he's always moving away from the microphone, going a little bit into this very boxy position, which just makes it sound more intense on the top, completely honestly. If he wanted it to sound less intense, yeah, just relax that jaw position. And da, then da, versus and da, and da. It's just a small little vowel change. Again, nothing wrong with how he's doing it right now. It just needs to be a choice. And so when you're practicing, explore all of these different options so that you know when you're in a position of performing rather than just practicing, that you've explored all those different options, and then you just choose what you want to communicate in the moment. Or you might not even choose at all how to do that. It's just your emotion drives that choice. But because you have practiced it and know what it feels like to be balanced in a bunch of different shades of that pitch, you're able to draw upon that. And I bet that is the case with him. But, just sometimes it's not. And so I do think it's important, even for professional singers who are obviously really comfortable with what they're doing, to just challenge themselves to strip away even more tension. Make it as easy as possible.
I've got these questions always running through my head.
It's a warm sound.
Things that I would like to understand. If we are born to
Hearing a little bit of the vibrato is also a nice sign. The vibrato, when he uses it, it doesn't sound unbalanced. I know that's a lame answer, kind of, just saying, yeah, that vibrato sounds good, but you can actually analyze vibrato, record someone and put them into a program and see exactly how far the distance of their vibrato is and exactly the speed of the vibrato. And you can use that, if you're a smarter person than me, to determine what's actually happening. With me, it just sounds right. It just sounds like that's an easy to make sound, and it doesn't sound unbalanced. And sometimes people kind of fake vibrato, and that's where it sounds funky. but when I hear that vibrato that sounds good, to me that implies the rest of what he's doing is probably in a balanced place, because unfortunately, like, vibrato is a thing that kind of happens when the rest of the voice is balanced well, and if people try to rush that process, sometimes it does find a place that doesn't sound as good, or it just sounds like a fake vibrato or something. It sounds unbalanced, and it stinks because, like, sometimes people do get this really well-balanced voice and the vibrato doesn't really come. Just be patient. There are some exercises you can use to kind of trick it out when it's in that good place, but I think that it's much better to just let it kind of happen. Like with him, is vibrato a very required stylistic decision in the kind of music that he's doing? Sometimes, like some good singers use it a little, but I don't think it's as prevalent as it is with some other genres, and yet it sounds totally natural when it happens with him. Sometimes, like when opera singers who just do a lot of vibrato on all the notes because it is stylistically required, when they go to sing some other stuff, it sounds weird. With him, like, it's just coming in sometimes and it sounds totally authentic to everything else that he's doing. So I think that this is a good example of how you can use vibrato in a stylistically appropriate way in styles other than classical and musical theater, where it's more expected. One thing that might be helpful, honestly, is just working on the breathing a little bit. That said, there are a lot of different theories on how you should breathe for high belty notes. And one of the theories is honestly having that shallow kind of raised breath, like what you can see with him. When he's breathing in, it's kind of a gasp for just one beat. And you see everything kind of raise. That's a thing that some people teach. It's not one thing that I teach, but, you know, it works for some people quite well. And so, again, just test different ways of doing it. If this is working, that's great, but also test if having a nice lower diaphragmatic breath is easier. If it's easier, go with that one. If this one is easier, go with this one. It's just knowing all of the options that you have and exploring all of them and finding what's appropriate for specific times. Because, like, legitimately, that might be the best way to breathe, and only he knows for sure by going through all of that and just kind of judging for himself and what his comfort level is.
I wrestle with my thoughts, I shut the handle down. Running from my past, I'm praying now.
I think that the screams that he did in that were actually benefited by how good he is at singing other things, because it does turn into just kind of a filter. If he's in this, ma, 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 it's very open, very easy feeling, yeah, 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 and then he just adds this, kind of on top of it, but everything else is remaining about the same. It's interesting because the good screams actually feel like they can reduce pressure sometimes. So going back and forth between dirty sounds, distorted sounds like this, and clean sounds, I think is good for just building your entire voice. Like, they can benefit each other tremendously.
I lost my goddamn mind.
Beautiful vowel.
It happens all the time.
I liked when he went up to that A flat, you could see the tip of his tongue kind of creeping out. So whether that's a conscious thing that he's done to get his tongue out of the way, or it's just what he's figured out, like, works, I don't think his tongue is much of an issue. It's just like an awesome big open vowel. You can see from the front of his mouth, it's this shape, just straight down with his jaw. He didn't have to smile into that one. I think that's like his best vowel. And then when he did that, the tongue just kind of slides forward to open up all of the space in the back, because if the tongue was retracting, the tongue is a huge muscle and it would take up a lot of space in the back of your throat. So to me, that was a beautiful example of like a really open vowel. Does it sound theater-y? Maybe, but like, I think it sounds amazing. Like, that's his best sound in my opinion so far.
I can't believe I'm actually meant to be
He has really good dynamic control up there.
trying to console you. And I'm so high on misery.
Yeah, the only only thing that I'd want to like make sure it's a conscious thing that he's doing is this thing that he does a lot. He like pulls away from the mic a lot. And I just want to see if that is like why he's doing that and if it feels better to not do that. Because I think it probably would. But, you know, he's also the one who seems to be doing pretty well. We got a ton of requests for this song. People are obviously connecting to it. It really is just little percentages of improvement on efficiency to make it feel like you're never at risk of losing your voice. You're never at risk of blowing it out because everything is as good as possible. And I think that like the really good artists that have super long careers, they notice that and they're willing to continually make these improvements. And I bet that he would be like that. Like everything that I've seen so far from him is like really healthy singing. It's just a few little things that it's like, yeah, you can get away with it, but why? I feel like it's not the best way of expressing it. But again, that's totally preference at this point. That's aesthetic preference from me. That's bias from me. And like maybe he does feel completely loose and he's just doing this on purpose. I just don't think so. Like it doesn't feel like it because it does seem a little stiff whenever he pulls away. But again, totally being picky at that point. Really good E vowel. Opens his mouth the exact same amount like this, and then the tongue does all of the work to get the vowel differentiation. He's using these glottal onsets. Up, up. He's finding the good vowel shape first. Up. And then it's almost like you hold your breath into it and just use that to slam into it. But it doesn't sound like it's getting too heavy when he's doing that. So I think that glottal onsets are actually a really great tool that people traditionally have underused for balancing the voice, because the danger is when someone uses a glottal onset that all of these muscles around your throat, these extrinsic muscles, will get involved and it'll become a really strained sound. But it doesn't have to be the case. You can have everything be really balanced and not grabbing, and then all that's happening is the vocal folds are starting together and then kind of exploding into a phonation rather than letting the air start with it, or letting the air and the muscle start at the same time. It's like the muscle kind of starts with this. But what happens when you do that is you do tend to get a more robust sound. You just do. It brings the chords together at about the same amount all the way through your range if you're using that. So one of my favorite exercises is like this squeaky hum, because it starts with all of these little kind of pops. This because when you do that and you ask for the same volume all the way through and that same approach all the time, that starts getting your vocal folds used to coming together the same amount at various levels of stretchiness or at different pitches.
You try to reach me, but you just can't help me. So long, goodbye. You try to save me. This time, 'cause now I've lost my fucking mind.
I think he does a really, really good job when he goes to these higher notes of not collapsing the space within. And the thing is, the tessiture of this song is really freaking high. Like, all of it is above the middle C. So he doesn't get very much respite from going up into those really high notes, where sometimes I think it's easier for certain voice types to like just jump up there for a second or for a few notes and then spend a lot of time back down low. And that's where voice typing actually starts to matter, where you might be a tenor if you're able to sing up in this passaggio area for 5 minutes. You just might be. You might be a baritone if you can only do it for a few measures. That's one thing that you kind of have to consider when typing your voice. But again, does voice typing help for most people? I think maybe not until you get to a certain level that you're just using that knowledge of your voice type to help you choose different songs to help you get better at certain things. But yeah, he might be a tenor because he's spending all this time up there and it sounds super open, super easy.
And there's no fucking time. I can't believe I'm actually meant to be trying to console.
Really delicate going between the kind of yelly, belty timbre that he's using so well and that flipped one. He was able to kind of blend them together without it sounding super clunky, and I think that's a really big skill, being able to have all that control. And that's why using a lot of very hooty, soft kind of falsetto integration exercises can be such a beautiful thing, because if you can figure out how to get your voice balanced in that situation, I think that tends to be less pressured than sometimes approaching it from the side of muscle. If you start from the side of air and from quiet rather than from the side of getting really big and then you just kind of lean into that sound more and more, I think that can result in smoother things. And so even when I do a lot of like glottal stops and really aggressive, nasty sounds to try to find a little bit more chord closure, I always try to balance it out with these top-down, hooty, soft sounds so that the body going back and forth between them really quickly starts being like, oh, I know how they're connected. And then you can start filling in the gaps between those two coordinations. Yeah, every time that he's singing loud and high, his mouth is in this shape. It's great. He knows exactly what to do when he goes there. Whenever he wants to kind of make it overdrive, he goes into this shape. Just a little bit more. And whenever he wants it to be soft and more gentle, he does this shape. And it's working really well for him.
Can't you see?
Yeah, it's a gorgeous fry scream. Sounds really, really good. It doesn't have a ton of pitch underneath it, but you can hear some pitch, and it's a higher pitch sound. It's a really consistent kind of rattling sound. Sounds like fry to me. Sounds awesome. Same thing with him, like that. At that point, it was mostly the distortion. It didn't have as much tone underneath the scream, but it sounded good. It's like this, but more intense, like a lot more pressure underneath with that sound. It was obvious you could see some of the pressure building with it, but it's not just a straight out, okay, I'm gonna yell this out, I'm gonna scream this out. It's like knowing what that sound sounds like, and he has that sound balanced. Even though, like, for us, perceptually, it's like, oh, that's really intense, and that's a really cool, big sound. Like, for him, it might not feel too much different than all of the real good singing that he was doing before, because I think that the skills are so much more similar than a lot of people are willing to give it credit for. It's just, like, even airflow, even amounts of resistance, and an even vowel. And even though the proportions of each of those things are slightly changed when it comes to singing to screaming, it's actually not that far different from the proportions that you need to sing really, really clean, beautiful music at the same time. Not saying that this isn't beautiful, because like people can find beauty in this kind of sound. I find beauty in this kind of sound. You could see as soon as like it went into that place, my face changed. Like it hits people in a different way, being able to access those weird sounds. Yeah, they sound awesome.
Thank you, guys.
His spoken voice also sounds really clear. Thank you, guys! It's kind of in the same place as when he was singing, just less intense and at less of a high pitch, but like it was still fairly high. The placement was fairly similar. The vowels were fairly similar. So having that kind of connection to your singing from your speech, where it's not something that you're treating drastically different. It's just you're singing it on specific values and on specific notes, and with like a little bit more care for tonal quality, I guess, but where like you can minimize as many differences. You don't need to change as much from your speech to singing. It makes the product a lot smoother, because even the people who are singing all the time, who are singing for a living, they tend to speak more than they sing. And so if you can spend most of your day using your voice in a similar way, in that it is really well balanced, just less intense, it makes the change when you go to sing a lot less drastic. Where if I'm teaching all day and I get really tired or something and I just start under supporting and I'm talking like this all the time, if I go to sing and I've been talking like this for the whole day, it's not going to feel as good as if I've been speaking like this all day and everything is a little bit more melodic. Plus, people are just more interested in me when I do this, and it is a thing that I tend to do. I have been accused by people before of being like a really monotone speaker, because sometimes when I'm not performing, kind of, because this is a performance, even though it's like me, I tend to under support. And I tend to get everything really, really monotonous. And when I go to sing after I've been doing that for a while, it's bad. So it's a thing that I've really had to focus on, of trying to keep this flowing phonation while I'm speaking, trying to let it be melodically different rather than just getting stuck in one place. Where it does seem like this singer has that. I think that a lot of these guys, if they didn't have that, like, they'd blow their voices out, because just the lifestyle of these tours gets really, really hard. But yeah, they sound awesome. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment below of some other video you'd like me to analyze, and any other questions that you might have. If you want a voice lesson with me, you can go check out my website, vocalease.net. And if you want to connect with other people who like my videos and who are just awesome people, go check out my Discord. It's a beautiful community, and there's a link in the description below. Thank you.